When I woke up, they told me I was the real heiress who had been swapped at birth. But the family already had someone they had raised for over 10 years, the so-called fake heiress. My family expected me to feel inferior and jealous, to hate the injustice of fate, and to sink into endless resentment. But as I looked at this brand new era, with no wars, no hunger, no fear of death, to me, it was truly the best of times. When I came to, my head felt like it was going to explode. I reached up to clutch it, strange thoughts flooding into my mind. For a moment, I didn't even know who I was, a blank void. It wasn't until the noise in my head quieted that I had the energy to look around at the world, a place both unfamiliar and yet strangely familiar. A wave of disorientation swept over me. In a daze, I heard voices outside. "She's not faking it, right?" a teenage boy's voice said. "Hurting herself on purpose so everyone feels sorry for her, and then making everyone blame Anna? Anna's the one you grew up watching." "Gary," a clear male voice interrupted, "this is a family matter. You've overstepped. I have a marriage engagement with Anna, of course I'm on her side," the teenage voice continued. "I don't care where this other sister popped out from. Our family only recognizes Anna." I couldn't hear the rest clearly. I opened my eyes to a stark white ceiling and began to think about who I was. Adela. That was my name. I remembered the feeling of a bullet piercing my heart, the suffocating, unwilling sensation of nearly dying. But now, I was definitely not Adela who had survived under a gun. This body felt foreign too. I wasn't this young. My hands bore calluses, but not the kind caused by obvious housework. After some time, someone pushed the door open and noticed I was awake. I saw the faces of the people who had been speaking outside, a handsome young man and a teenage boy. "Adela, you're awake?" the clear voice asked. I looked at him but didn't speak at once. Perhaps seeing them added a layer of memory to my mind. Maybe I should call him brother. But I still didn't speak. The boy beside him grew impatient. "Hey, how long are you going to keep pretending?" I continued to remain silent, staring at them. After a while, the young man realized something was off and called a doctor. Hospitals nowadays seemed much more advanced. After the doctor in a white coat examined me, he told them I most likely had short-term memory loss. The impatient boy had already left. I didn't want to see him anyway, just looking at him felt noisy. The young man sat down beside the bed and said, "Adela, I'm your brother, Marsh. Do you remember me? The doctor says you'll slowly remember." He told me about recent events. The original owner of this body, Adela, was the daughter of a wealthy family who had been maliciously swapped at birth and raised by another family. She was his biological younger sister. For over 10 years, they had no idea the daughter they raised wasn't real. It was a cliché plot. Someone deliberately swapped the children. The real daughter was sold to a remote mountain village, spending over a decade in hardship. Only last year did Adela learn from her adoptive parents that she had been bought from human traffickers. She struggled mightily to report it to the authorities, waited for results, and finally reunited with her biological parents. Unfortunately, over those 10+ years, they had already raised another daughter, someone extremely accomplished. Adela ended up in the hospital after a conflict with Anna, falling down the stairs and suffering a concussion. She was sensitive. After enduring years of hardship, a teenage girl covered in scars suddenly learned she could have lived such a privileged life. She felt intense hostility toward the person who had taken her place, especially since that girl was more beautiful, talented, and socially skilled. Anna also had a fiancé, handsome and outstanding. They seemed perfectly matched. Driven by inferiority and resentment, Adela was full of jealousy and hostility toward Anna. But my memories told me this time, when Adela fell down the stairs, it was indeed Anna who had pushed her. This situation affected the fate of both girls. Adela felt resentment and jealousy, and naturally, Anna would be anxious about her identity. I looked at him and asked, "Brother, where are Mom and Dad?" Marsh was silent for a moment. I knew from Adela's memory that today was Anna's piano competition. They went to watch the contest, along with the noisy Gary from before. "They'll come see you tonight," Marsh replied. I stayed quiet. Marsh said, "Adela, both you and Anna are my sisters. Although your misfortune is because of her biological mother, Anna truly knows nothing. Her biological mother passed away a few years ago. Our parents drew up a contract to give you 5% of the company as compensation." I felt calm inside, but I couldn't help feeling pity for the girl named Adela. The family she desperately searched for could only offer her limited love. I didn't know where she had gone, or if she was still alive, but the fact that I had her memories felt strange. "Do you have that 5%? I asked, looking up at Marsh. He froze. I continued, "Anna has some too, right? Maybe less, like 3%? You remember?" I nodded and asked, "Where's my phone?" Marsh handed me a square device. I had seen its use in Adela's memories. "I want to be alone for a while," I said. Marsh left the room. I picked up the phone, unlocked it from memory, and began searching for everything I wanted to know. So many years had passed. The era I existed in was over, becoming history. My country had grown stronger through hardships. Despite every difficult step, we now stood proudly in the world, respected by all. This country, this era, no invasions, no wars, no food shortages. And I, Adela, was just a speck in the river of history. For a long time, I hadn't even used my real name. One afternoon, holding my phone, tears streamed down my face as I stared at the screen. The images that had only appeared in my dreams had finally come true. To me, this truly was the best of times. Even though I had the memories of another Adela in my mind, this world still felt unfamiliar to me. I was full of curiosity. Lying in the hospital bed, it wasn't until my current parents appeared that I realized where the ache in my chest was coming from, this body's emotions. She, or perhaps I, felt unwilling, craving an answer. I think I understood her feelings. All she wanted was a bit of favoritism, without having to take it from anyone else. I looked at my elegantly dressed parents, and behind them was Anna, wearing a lavish gown. She was beautiful, or rather, she had been raised to be beautiful. Today, she was dressed up again. I lifted my eyes, calm and unshaken, to watch them. "Adela," said the mother of this body, "how are you feeling?" "Good," I answered honestly. After all, I wasn't the Adela they thought I was. Once I realized my identity, I also understood that even if my personality suddenly changed, they would just assume I had a psychological or emotional problem. So there was no need for me to act like the previous Adela. They seemed surprised by my tone, or perhaps they thought I was being submissive. My current father, seeing the bandages on my head, theatrically said, "This time we'll let it slide. But next time you cause trouble, don't blame your mom and me if we don't care." I recalled my own father, a refined scholar. Though strict like a family patriarch, he always spoke with reason and logic. Without comparison, I didn't realize he was far better at being a father than most. I just nodded, not bothering to say more. As for the elegantly dressed, beautiful intruder, a flicker of panic passed in her eyes. She glanced back at me before leaving. I met her gaze. There was perhaps a hint of unconscious provocation in her eyes. She looked down on me, yet at the same time, feared me. After waking, I spent the next few days relatively fully occupied, almost glued to my phone every day. This era had something called the internet, which I considered one of humanity's greatest inventions. Almost any information I wanted could be found there. War hadn't vanished from the world, but my country had been at peace for quite a while. Eventually, the bandages and gauze on my head were removed, and I was discharged. I was taken to a house that could only be described as exquisite, brought there by Marsh. He said, "Dad's on a business trip, Mom's meeting a friend. Rest today. Tomorrow you go to school. Even if you're behind, you need to catch up." Even the discharge didn't feel like a family welcome. In Marsh's words, there was an underlying message. They only valued people who upheld appearances. This reminded me of a friend's family, prestigious, daughters trained as refined young ladies, sons polished and courteous. But in families like that, it wasn't unusual for the outward appearance to be all show, with the reality underneath far less admirable. Adela had only been back for less than a year. They enrolled her in a new school. She was now in her first year of high school. The enrollment system was very different from what I remembered, with numerous subjects. Memory told me that Adela had chosen mostly liberal arts courses after a semester of high school. I returned to her room and carefully looked through her books. The next day, a driver took me to school. Anna and I attended the same school, but she was in the advanced class, always at the top of the ranks, a sharp contrast to Adela. Even at the same school, we didn't take the same car. Using my memory, I found my classroom. Upon entering, the usually noisy room felt quiet for a moment. Adela didn't have a strong presence in class. Her current identity was awkward, officially the adopted child. Because of Anna and Gary's engagement, Gary only recognized Anna, though the family might have their own considerations. If Anna's true identity were revealed, they might not approve of her, but certainly wouldn't approve of Adela. So they chose to preserve the engagement, for their benefit. The biological daughter becoming the adopted one was essentially another form of disregard for Adela. She longed for family love, for favoritism, but this family couldn't provide it. I realized that, in this class, I was a somewhat out-of-place presence. This was a private high school. Many students came from wealthy families. As the adopted daughter, naturally, there was gossip about me. Having missed a few days due to hospitalization, who knew what version of events had spread among them? I lowered my eyes to my desk. Adela's handwriting wasn't beautiful. I'd have to mimic it for a while. "Adela," someone called, and a shadow fell in front of me. "I heard you were in the hospital." I looked up. It was a red-haired teenage boy. My expression shifted from surprise to indescribable. I couldn't even appreciate him. I knew who he was, a rich second-generation admirer of Anna, named Daniel. Got something to say? I knew the original owner of this body wasn't close to him either. I heard you tried to push Anna, but accidentally fell down the stairs yourself? Or did you do it on purpose? He spoke bluntly, probably not considering whether the real Adela sitting in the classroom could even handle such accusations. I met his gaze and suddenly smiled. Yes. I argued with her, lost, and decided to fall headfirst down the stairs to frame her. So what? Daniel wasn't expecting that answer. Neither were the others. He froze. You? I asked, anything else? After a long pause, he spat out, how dare you, an adopted daughter. Adopted daughter. I leaned back, scrutinized the red-haired boy from head to toe, and snorted. And what authority do you have to defend Anna? At this age, boys were easily provoked, ready to fight for their crush, but also easy to strike a nerve. Sure enough, he was angry. Do you want to die? He snapped. At that moment, someone entered the room. It was the homeroom teacher. She scanned the classroom, and Daniel sulked back to his seat. I began learning in this era's classroom. I flipped through history books again and again, finding familiar history as well as events from much further back and far into the future. Compared to liberal arts textbooks, the science books looked much newer. A noticeable imbalance. I realized that society's development was far beyond what my imagination had once pictured. Adela's memories provided much information, but what she didn't know, I had to discover for myself. For a whole week, I immersed myself in knowledge. I noticed the indifference of those around me. From Adela's memories, I roughly found a word to describe my situation: school bullying, isolation by the entire class, teachers turning a blind eye. That was about it. For a week, I processed the emotions this body carried. Sometimes, I couldn't even tell if the sadness was mine or hers. I was curious whether the other Adela was still alive, but I never found the answer. My interactions with them remained distant. Through my study of law, I knew that I was now just an adopted daughter who had been raised only because of blood ties. They noticed the changes in my personality. My current father gave a symbolic compliment, saying I looked more presentable. In his eyes, my lack of contention and willingness to yield already counted as a huge improvement. Anna spoke up at the right moment. Dad, I heard Adela hasn't been getting along very well with Daniel and the others. Should I say something to them? Anna had a good relationship with those rich kids. After all, they moved in the same social circles. But when she said this, Patty's brows furrowed. Patty, my current father. I spoke up. Dad, I want to live at the boarding school. Anna's comment was interrupted. Patty's tone became stern. Why would you want to live at the school? Isn't it fine living at home? He meant well, of course. A patriarchal type. In modern terms, this was the kind of person who simply couldn't see the problem. I lowered my eyes. My foundation is too weak. I want to spend more time on my studies to improve my grades faster. Patty didn't agree with me living at the boarding school, but I knew he would eventually relent. Anna would probably be secretly glad I stayed away from them. During this period, I loved going out and exploring this new world. I lived under the same roof with them. I think they could see the changes in Adela, but they all interpreted it as me being submissive toward them. I brought up the boarding school plan to Marsh. He didn't understand. If you want better grades, the family can hire a tutor. There's no need to live at school. In a rich kid's mind, my action was like asking for trouble. Perhaps even a bit willful. I looked at him and said, I want to live at school. If my grades don't improve, we'll reconsider. Can you talk to Mom and Dad for me? From memory, this was probably the first time this returning younger sister had made a request to Marsh. He was silent for a long moment before replying. I can't guarantee success. I successfully moved into the boarding school. Patty was authoritarian, but he valued his eldest son greatly. Marsh, already a university graduate working at the family company, could be called his pride. I don't know what Marsh said, but someone handled my boarding school enrollment. I was placed in a single dorm room. I was very satisfied. The isolation from others seemed trivial to me. After all, my mind was not really that of a 16 or 17-year-old girl. My peers' behavior struck me as childish and immature. Several rich boys, led by Daniel, often pulled small stunts, knocking my books to the floor with a half-hearted apology, or putting little insects on my desk. It wasn't a big deal. Complaining wouldn't necessarily get a satisfying result. One noon, when Daniel was leaning on his desk sleeping, he sensed something off. He opened his eyes to find a small black snake peeking out from under the desk, flicking its tongue at him. The entire classroom erupted in chaos. Daniel screamed first, followed by the rest of the class. I sat at my desk, smiling quietly as I watched my terrified classmates, and for a moment, I met Daniel's gaze. The little black snake vanished amidst the screams. Later, Daniel swore in front of the homeroom teacher that I had released it, claiming I was far too calm. The teacher looked at me. Adela, do you have anything to say? I shook my head. Teacher, it wasn't me. Daniel was certain. If not you, then who? You're the only one sitting properly at your desk. I explained calmly. I just happen not to be afraid of snakes. Impossible, Daniel said, agitated. You must be trying to get back at me. I laughed. Why would I get back at you? What have you done to me? Daniel froze, unable to answer. I turned to the teacher. Teacher, this is not a small matter. Why not check the classroom surveillance? Surveillance. A new tool I had learned about in this era. Very useful. The footage went back a day, but it couldn't reveal who put the snake in. However, it did show that the day before, Daniel and a few others had cheerfully placed a few caterpillars on my desk while I wasn't there. I watched the footage without changing expression. Teachers and administrators around me looked puzzled. Daniel was visibly uncomfortable. At this age, boys weren't shameless, they just didn't get caught. After being scared by the snake, his mental defenses were extremely weak. That morning's footage showed that before anyone arrived in the classroom, a black snake had slithered in by itself through the door, maneuvered past several desks, and ended up perfectly inside Daniel's desk. Watching the footage, Daniel's hair stood on end. He had been in close contact with the snake for hours. His face went pale. He took the day off that same day, reportedly scared into a fever. That night, several students didn't show up, probably fearing another snake. Afterward, the students' parents and the school argued, and the school organized an anti-snake, anti-insect campaign. None of that concerned me. At night, back in my dorm, the desk lamp on, I studied the lessons I had missed. After a while, a rustling sound caught my attention. A small, completely black snake climbed slowly along the lamp toward my wrist, flicking its tongue, but calm and cute. I chuckled and tapped its little head. After that day, I felt much more at peace. Daniel and the others still attended class punctually. But watching the surveillance, his parents were present. Daniel's behavior, openly inciting others to bully a female classmate, frowned both parents. Both were ambitious in their careers, the mother even more so than the father. He had learned a lesson. However, I received no apology. Adela didn't either. After the monthly exam, my grades had improved noticeably, though still not enough. At school, I rarely saw Anna. Yet she remained a school celebrity. News about her, competitions, awards, or matters with Gary, even rumors involving me, never stopped reaching me. On weekends, I preferred not to return home. Finding excuses was easy. I bought tickets and visited every exhibition in the city. I saw many historical relics and even found familiar names in some records, while many others, like me, had left no trace in history, like streams flowing silently into the sea. Even now, I carried complex emotions. Even walking in places I had once walked, I often felt the absurdity of time and change. In less than a century, the transformation of this land was beyond anything the old me could have imagined. The end of the semester came quickly, and I submitted my subject transfer request to the homeroom teacher. The current college entrance system seemed to have changed somewhat, and after much thought, I chose physics, chemistry, and biology. The homeroom teacher looked at my report card and said, Adela, your grades show that you'd have more advantage in the humanities. Indeed, over most of the semester, I had gone from the worst class to the top. My history and politics scores were even among the best in the grade, and my English was also strong. In the second year, students would be reassigned according to their grades, and I might end up in another class. Despite my significant improvement in the sciences, my teacher still wasn't optimistic. She patiently advised me that girls who excel in the humanities might struggle if they suddenly switched to sciences. I didn't change my mind. The matter reached my family. Patty didn't agree with my decision to transfer subjects. In his eyes, if Anna and I focused on humanities and got into a good university, it would bring face to the family when marriage came up. Anna and I were both excluded from the company inheritance, but I had no intention of listening to him. Patty was furious. You clearly do better in humanities. Why insist on studying something you're not good at? With your current grades, you could get into a good university. What if you ruin your science scores? I stayed calm. I can manage. I knew why he was so angry, not because of my science ability, but because he hated anyone in this house who dared to resist him. He seemed almost amused by my defiance. Just then, my current mother quietly interjected. Marsh was also good at sciences from a young age. Maybe Adela. When she said that, I saw Anna's face turn pale. Family favoritism showed in every aspect. Even Marsh usually sided with Anna. That was her strongest support, but blood relations couldn't change. I didn't care about the family, so I never paid attention to their usual displays of affection. Anna and Marsh's expensive clothes and jewelry in their room never bothered me, not even for the previous Adela. She was a girl who wanted love. I was past the age of seeking it. I insisted on studying sciences. Being overlooked in this family had its advantages. My persistence led the school to assign me to a new class. During the summer, everyone was busy. My parents focused on business and social obligations, Marsh handled company matters, and Anna took various music lessons while spending time with Gary. I didn't understand why 16 or 17-year-olds in this era were bound by a marriage contract. Perhaps they didn't see it as a constraint. I spent my days buried in my room studying. In this era, accessing information was fast and easy. With effort, I could find all kinds of online courses. Knowledge I had once wanted but had to give up due to limits now came flooding in. I studied obsessively. When my head was spinning, I stepped out of my room and headed downstairs, only to bump into Anna returning home. She was dressed extravagantly, her outfit expensive, her makeup flawless. When our eyes met, she paused, then her gaze flickered with disdain. I had no desire to speak and moved to walk past her. Adela, she called, do you think you're special just because you're the biological child? Words like these seemed familiar, like something the previous Adela might have heard. I looked at her curiously, waiting to hear more. This circle isn't for someone like you, who's so rustic, she said slowly. Since you came back, have you had any friends in this circle? They all look down on you. She tried to break down my defenses with her sharp words. I looked down at her. Anna saw no fear or resentment on my face. Her punch landed on cotton. You know, families like ours will only arrange marriages with suitable matches. Someone like you will only be married off to a mediocre man by your father, she said, thinking she'd frightened me with the worst possible scenario. I felt the irony. You're only a teenager and already placing your future in the hands of your family and men. Don't you find that sad? I asked. She laughed suddenly, mocking my naivety. Do you know where I started? A place most people could never reach, no matter how hard they try. Did you ever dare to imagine living like this? I understood. She was clear-headed, or at least relatively so amid the confusion. She knew what she wanted. I couldn't tell her that my youth had been far more indulgent than hers is now, that I was raised pampered, never worrying about the future. Not until I saw my nation crushed in flames under mountains of oppression. At that moment, I knew Anna and I could never think alike. So I said, then I hope you can always hold on to the kite string in your hand. The whole summer, I studied. I studied textbooks, this world, and the era I now lived in. Though I carried the memories of the previous Adela, her understanding of the world was, in some ways, outdated. Her misfortunes and regrets could no longer be fixed. All I could do was become better alongside her. I didn't demand attention. Anna might have been satisfied with my discretion. My parents thought I was insignificant. Marsh, my cheap older brother, could spare only a little patience to ask about my daily life. When school resumed, I exhaled. I moved to the new class without pause, burying myself in study. In this class, I felt a small difference, no isolation, no giggling, no ridicule. At first, my classmates looked at me with curiosity, then grew accustomed to me. Adela, are you a monster? How does someone go up tens of points from midterm to monthly exam? My deskmate shouted. Yes, I even had a deskmate. She was lively, amazed at my dedication and the speed of my improvement in sciences. Not just her, teachers were impressed as well. I vaguely remembered the new homeroom teacher advising on my grades. The stereotype was that girls might struggle in sciences. Considering my first-year humanities grades had been much stronger, they thought I was narrowing my path. I had to admit, out of all subjects, I still loved history, enjoying the sense of eras changing and life in the present. But I remembered the regrets of my like-minded friends in my previous life. Think ahead even in peace. That was the lesson we were supposed to learn. My ambitions were elsewhere. Sophomore year passed in the blink of an eye. It had been an extraordinary year. My grades climbed into the top 10 in the grade. It was a scene that shocked everyone. The teacher who had once advised me that humanities were my strength quietly went silent. Teachers from the humanities classes, envious of my humanities scores, came to inquire, only to be blocked by my current science teachers. Now, even if I wanted to switch back, the teachers might not let me. Although it was a private high school, not all students came from wealthy families. Many classmates were from moderately well-off households, so compared to them, my family was indeed considered affluent. Paddy was satisfied with my grades, but when he asked me to attend some fancy dinner, I refused. I knew exactly what kind of event it was. He began evaluating my value. Among those from similarly prominent families, he tried to select someone who could benefit his business. Marsh, still single, was also part of this calculation. Paddy was sizing up other girls for him too. My defiance angered him, and he cut off my allowance. A father who had only raised his daughter for less than 2 years acted like a tyrant king. I found this utterly ridiculous. He probably expected me to bow down for a life of luxury, and he forbade anyone from financially assisting me. He had forgotten that this daughter, who who had only returned home for 2 years, had never really enjoyed such luxury. I might indulge in the opportunities of the current era, but I never obsessed over money or status. For someone about to become an adult, there were countless ways to earn money. The most direct and suitable for a student like me was tutoring. Fortunately, this school was full of wealthy families. If they couldn't help me, I could find someone else. Networking truly mattered. My class monitor told me she had found a wealthy student whose parents would pay generously for tutoring. Her parents were very generous. The class monitor was kind herself, from a family in real estate, and I didn't know their exact social class, but I never saw anyone around willing to offend her. I gladly accepted her offer. When I arrived at the student's home at the agreed time, I saw a huge villa, much larger than their own. Very extravagant. I had already grown accustomed to surroundings like these, so I entered without a change in expression, and saw Daniel lounging on the sofa like a master. His reaction was bigger than mine. He jumped up like he'd stepped on a snake. Adela, why are you at my house? Ah, this young master. I laughed lightly. Classmate, long time no see. Let's get reacquainted. I'm Adela, your family's newly hired tutor. After that, how Daniel argued with his guardian about changing tutors was no longer my concern. In the end, he reluctantly sat beside me. Clearly, his rebellion had failed. This young master glared at me viciously. Don't think just because my mom likes you that you can do whatever you want. Believe me, I'll kick you out soon. I smiled lightly. Try me? He was furious. Daniel was not very polite. He would often say, aren't they your adoptive parents? Why are you out working? I didn't react to his words, keeping my focus on his grades. Daniel's math was hopeless. I had nothing to say, only his language and English were acceptable. I understood one thing. If you take money from someone, you have to deliver results. I needed to push Daniel to excel. His mother had given him too much. Senior year tuition was entirely my responsibility. I hadn't gone home that summer, and Patty, ever the tyrant, forbade anyone from helping me. I spent the entire summer trying various part-time jobs. Some were well paid, and I earned quite a lot. Later, I applied for a scholarship at school. Private high school tuition was expensive, but the scholarship covered a generous amount. I had no financial issues. After the first monthly exam of senior year, Daniel's parents were extremely satisfied with my tutoring results. I received a considerable payment and continued tutoring Daniel. Of course, he wasn't my only client, but he was my live advertisement. Daniel's improvement attracted the attention of several other wealthy students' parents, though scheduling conflicts meant I eventually tutored them together. Only Daniel remained one-on-one, to give his mother face. Rich kids were difficult to manage. They didn't care about grades. The only thing that motivated them was peer competition. When one improved, others were pushed forward as well. However, I couldn't continue tutoring for long. The school later assigned me to competitions. Other matters had to be set aside. Studying remained my primary duty. I watched my ranking rise on the school honor roll. The label of adopted daughter faded. I became simply Adela. Over time, my name rose to the top, not just in school, but citywide. As the college entrance exam approached, some classmates relaxed, their families having paved smooth paths for them. I heard that Anna would study abroad with Gary. When I heard this, I still felt responsible for my former employers. When I encountered Daniel, I offered him a few encouraging words to prepare well for exams. He stared at me for a long time, stammering, unable to say anything substantial. He looked both embarrassed and frustrated. Perhaps my words had struck a nerve. After the college entrance exams, I rented a small place outside. One day, Marsh called. When do you plan to come home? He asked. I paused. Is there something you need? Marsh continued. How long will you sulk with mom and dad? Your exam results are almost out. Afterward, they'll hold a graduation party for you and Anna. Are you going to rely on part-time work for the entire university period? He weighed pros and cons for me. If I apologized, it would all be over, or perhaps it had already passed. My results spoke for themselves. On the day the results were released, I refreshed the page multiple times, not seeing my score. Expected. Soon, my phone rang constantly, not only from admissions officers and homeroom teachers, but even my family. Patty personally contacted me this time. I guess some of the admissions calls had reached them. They had my family contact details from enrollment. I didn't know my exact rank, but I was clearly not doing poorly. Unfortunately, I was the only one listed in my current household registration. Patty suggested I pick a first-tier university and follow his advice on the major, law or finance, he said, or something in foreign languages would be fine. Before I made my choice, the results came out. First place. I wasn't surprised. I had worked long and hard for this, and the result was the reward of my effort. After politely declining many admissions officers, I chose the university I wanted. When the news reached home, Patty was furious. "You're a girl. Why go to that university? Why the National Defense Science University?" My family's business circle had nothing to do with my choice. Not only Patty, but my mother, Mrs. Emma, also didn't understand. Her well-maintained face showed disapproval and a worry I didn't know. "Adela, it's too exhausting for a girl. You don't need this path," she said. Marsh frowned. "What are you thinking?" Even Anna looked confused. I could only say, "I know what I'm doing." The path I chose had never changed. I still remember that after I was admitted, the school was in shock for quite a while. In fact, that year's results were impressive across the board. Several of my tutoring clients had made progress, especially Daniel. He had been accepted into a very good university, and according to his mother, they intended to guide him toward a political career. It was hard to imagine that someone who had once been so reckless could start becoming responsible. I attended Daniel's graduation banquet. To my surprise, he hadn't invited Anna, or perhaps Anna didn't come. He wore a suit, looking somewhat presentable, but his expression was awkward. I raised my glass to congratulate him. "Congratulations." Daniel stared at me without moving. I glanced down at my outfit, though not a big-name brand. My deep teal cheapah was one I liked, and I thought it appropriate. "What's the matter?" I asked. Daniel, now lacking the old fiery tone, hesitated before finally saying, "I'm sorry. I was wrong before. Thank you for all your help this past year." The young master clearly wasn't used to apologizing. His face flushed red and he seemed nervous. I smiled lightly. "I accept your apology, but you don't need to thank me. If anyone deserves thanks, it's your mother for trusting me and offering such a high hourly rate. After all, I was getting paid to do a job." Daniel seemed like he wanted to say more, but someone approached to greet him, an elder of his family. I smiled and stepped aside. They finally realized that I probably didn't care about their family wealth, and in choosing my future, I wouldn't listen to any of them. Patty once again threatened that I would regret not coming back to obey him. I never understood where his confidence came from. After summer ended, I went back to school. University in this era. Over 2 years, I fully adapted to modern life and learned a great deal. Past me would never have imagined the world as it is now. After university started, my contact with them became minimal. I rarely returned home even during holidays. That place had never truly been Adela's home, and it would never be mine. A place without belonging, can that even be called home? My university years were busy, fulfilling, and joyful. I made many new friends and learned many new things. After completing my undergraduate degree, I continued with graduate school. During this time, I heard that Anna had married Gary. I didn't attend the wedding. At the time, I was working on a closed project with my advisor, my phone was away, and by the time I checked, her wedding had already ended several days prior. Patty was still angry, but he had no control over me. When I was about to graduate from my master's program, Marsh called. "I'm getting married on the 16th of next month. Will you come?" He was almost 30, marrying was normal. I heard the bride was a well-matched young lady from a prominent family and that they had been dating for 3 years. Marsh had probably learned his lesson and gave me more than a month's notice. I couldn't promise outright, so I said, "If there's no scheduling conflict, I'll attend." I recalled the moment I awoke in this era. I still reminded myself that I had no right to make peace on behalf of the former Adela, and from my perspective, I didn't agree with their family values. Soon, I would be pursuing a PhD. Knowing I was attending the wedding, my advisor frowned and submitted a leave request for me. When I returned, I was accompanied by 2 bodyguards. Though casually dressed, their presence was unmistakable. At Marsh's wedding, I saw many familiar faces, some still living carefree, others married with children. Some people didn't even recognize me at first. But when their gaze landed on both Marsh and me, they whispered in astonishment. My appearance hadn't changed much. Since Marsh and I were biological siblings, it was natural to see similarities. Especially considering Marsh was 185 centimeters tall and I was 175 centimeters. By contrast, Anna appeared smaller and less similar to the family in features. Rumors could become absurd quickly. Some had already begun speculating whether I or Anna was the biological daughter. Given that Anna had been in the public eye all these years, most people assumed I was Patty's illegitimate child. After all, there was no reason to adopt another daughter when there were already 2. I didn't care much what others guessed. When I finally saw Marsh and his new wife, I offered a wedding gift and my congratulations. Marsh's expression was complex when he saw me. He glanced at the 2 bodyguards behind me and said softly, "Looks like if I don't send an invitation in advance, you wouldn't come." I said nothing. It was true. He probably realized that the path I chose was different from what they had always known. I didn't feel much responsibility or belonging toward them. Marsh asked, "Are you going to greet Mom and Dad?" "Later," I said. I hadn't expected to see Daniel there. He had matured a lot since before, had embarked on a political career, and with family support, his future looked smooth. Adela, he called, slightly awkward. Long time no see. How have you been? Memories of Daniel flashed in my mind. It was hard to reconcile this refined man with the one who had once intimidated me in the classroom. I'm well. And you? I replied. I'm good, he smiled. After a moment, he asked, how long will you stay this time? Just until tomorrow, I said. There were still piles of lab data waiting for verification. Daniel looked slightly disappointed. After a while, he chuckled. You're really busy now. It's hard to reach you normally. I didn't deny it. Sometimes I did reply slowly. At that moment, Daniel's mother approached. She had been kind to me in the past, and I greeted her. Aunt, long time no see. She remained dignified and elegant, smiling at me. Adela, you've grown so beautiful. Do you have a boyfriend? Any chance with our Daniel? Daniel froze. Mom, what are you saying? I chuckled. Aunt, I've seen many young girls secretly looking at Daniel. Daniel said, don't mind Mom. She's joking. She teases everyone like that. I feel like a leftover product. This little exchange was just normal chatter at Marcia's wedding. After the wedding, I met my parents. Unexpectedly, a young man stood beside them. Judging from Patty's introduction, I could guess a little. I'm leaving tomorrow, I said. Patty frowned. Why so soon? You're going back to school. Why does it feel like the school bought you out? Mrs. Emma said, this is the third son of the Lee family, a friend of your brother. Young people meet each other. I laughed, suddenly recalling a senior complaining about being forced to meet prospective matches during a holiday. No need to meet, and no need to set me up with a marriage partner, I said calmly. If someone wants to marry me now, any direct relatives within 3 generations require political approval. Can you accept that? I ignored how angry the couple looked. As I walked down the corridor, I saw Anna and Gary. This childhood pair marriage wasn't as sweet as I imagined. They were arguing, Gary tried to leave, and Anna tried to stop him. I overheard Gary say, did you see how weird everyone looked when they discussed Marcia and Adela looking more like siblings? Anna's voice sounded tired. You knew from the start, didn't you? Are you embarrassed now because Adela is beautiful, or because of her current status? The voice cut off. I walked out calmly, my bodyguards following. I didn't look at them, nor was it necessary. As I walked away, I could still faintly hear their argument behind me. After attending Marcia's wedding, I returned to school, fully immersed in my research. I didn't pay much attention to the outside world. During my doctoral studies, the only people I regularly communicated with were my advisor and senior students. Everyone's hair was thinning equally, a subtle reminder of time passing. The next time I heard news about them was online. A piece of land they owned had a serious accident. Not only had a large amount of money been invested, but even some workers were injured. The details were unclear. Rumors claimed the place was unclean, with some mysterious or negative energy lingering. A specialized department had now taken over the site. Photos circulated online showed people in traditional robes holding compasses entering an old, abandoned mansion. I wasn't concerned until I noticed a familiar gourd-shaped pendant in one of the photos. I stared at it for a long time, so absorbed that I didn't notice my surroundings until my advisor's voice broke through. What are you looking at so intently? I looked up. Professor, I'd like to request leave. I contacted Marsh, saying I wanted to visit that piece of land. He was obviously frustrated by the whole incident, and he sounded surprised when I said I planned to go. What are you going there for? Don't cause trouble. The land was already cordoned off with police tape, guarded at every entrance. Without someone to escort me, I couldn't enter. When I arrived, Marsh was waiting by the roadside. After not seeing him for a while, he looked worn out. He still didn't understand why I wanted to come. Adela, this isn't a place to play. The rumors online aren't baseless. You shouldn't go in. All I could see was the old, fragile mansion, as if something was urging me forward. Some questions I had never solved before seemed to be answered right in front of me. Inside, I saw special forces and an elderly man in traditional robes. The officers carried weapons resembling guns, and the elderly man looked grave. When they noticed us, their first instinct was to make us leave. But when my eyes met the robed elder, he seemed to sigh. So, a destined one has come. I didn't understand his words, but they allowed us to stay. Even those resembling the special forces didn't drive us away. I didn't know which department they belonged to, but they seemed official and serious. Walking through that crumbling house, every step felt heavy with history. Back in high school, I had investigated my hometown and visited before. My former home had been reduced to ruins during the war, then rebuilt afterward. This place wasn't anywhere I remembered, but on the second floor, in a dusty side room, a grayish gourd pendant hanging by the bed reminded me of someone. I had never been here before, but perhaps he had. I stepped closer and heard whispers below, seemingly trying to stop me from entering the room. I vaguely heard the words strongest negative energy. It was daytime, yet the room was dim and sunless. A wooden table in the corner was old and decayed. Seeing this, I could almost imagine, years ago, a young man in western trousers and a shirt leaning over a table. The air smelled of mildew. I slowly approached the bed and reached for the gourd pendant. At that moment, a gentle breeze seemed to stir. When I touched the pendant, it was a simple peachwood charm on a red cord, faded and brittle from years of wear. Just a light touch broke the cord. It felt as though a long-held answer was finally within reach. My hand trembled slightly as I held the pendant, shining my phone flashlight toward the base. Faint carvings were etched there, so blurred I almost couldn't make them out. But I recognized them, 3 characters, Adela. The year we separated, we exchanged pendants. This was the one I had given. The one I received had been buried with me somewhere unknown. Tears slid down my face without me noticing, blurring my vision. My long quiet heart burned with emotion. I heard footsteps mixed with breath beside me. Holding the gourd pendant, I slowly turned and saw a tall shadow in the dark room. At that moment, the door seemed to close behind him. Breathing stopped for a moment. I froze, staring at the figure. "Frank, is that you?" I took a step forward, wanting to see his face clearly, but the figure stepped back. "Frank," I called, pausing. "Let me see you, please." He stopped. In the dim light, I saw a wound on his neck, a slit throat scar. Tears fell again. Looking up, the face I had almost forgotten suddenly appeared. He was my Frank. I reached out to touch him, but my hand met only air. Grief hit me, the delayed sorrow made me cry aloud. My Frank, how long had he been trapped here? "Adela, don't cry." After a moment, I heard a voice from another world. Tears blurred my vision again, but I wanted to see him clearly. I wiped them away, and saw his hand reach out, then withdraw. Just as I couldn't touch him, he couldn't touch me. I looked up and finally saw his face clearly. He hadn't changed from my memory, delicate brows and refined features, but my sorrow was evident in my expression. "Frank, please tell me about your story," I whispered. I wanted to know what had happened to him, why he had been trapped here, and why I had awakened in this era. Frank's eyes held faint sadness. "Adela, I don't remember. He had been confined in this house for many years, until recent construction activity. He only remembered that he was waiting for someone. Seeing me brought that memory back. The person he was waiting for was me. He wanted to see me one last time." I stared at Frank, afraid that if I blinked, he would disappear. I had never imagined meeting a familiar soul in this life. I hadn't assumed Frank was alive, though I often thought that after I died, he might meet someone wonderful after the war, and his descendants would live on this land like I do now. But he, like me, had died in that era. He had remained alone here for many years. "Adela, I have to go," Frank said suddenly. I watched him, tears streaming again. "Adela, you must be happy." I reached out, but my hand grasped nothing. He slipped away like sand through my fingers. The room remained dim, yet my Frank was gone. All that remained in my hand was the gourd pendant, worn and aged by the years. It was as if what I had just seen had only been an illusion. The robed elder told me that Frank had been deeply attached to the past. Before he died, he had made a vow. He carried great merit in his soul, and it was his attachment that had brought me here, and that had kept him bound to this place for so many years. He had wanted to see me one last time. This was also the reason why strange occurrences had happened once the construction began. Frank might have caused greater harm to others, that was why the site had been halted and taken over by the authorities. If I hadn't appeared, the construction would have remained suspended indefinitely. The robed elder said Frank's soul radiated a golden light, and according to regulations, they could not interfere with a soul carrying such merit. He smiled and told me that I also carried golden light, the convergence of past and present lives. I didn't care about any of that. "Where has Frank gone?" I asked. "When a person dies, they enter the cycle of rebirth. Wandering among the living is like binding oneself in a cocoon. His attachment has dispersed, and he will be reborn." I didn't know exactly what he meant by reborn, but I sincerely hoped that Frank would have a peaceful and smooth next life. The restriction on the land was lifted, and construction could continue. Although Marsh didn't fully understand, he had come with me that day. He watched me go upstairs, and later saw me descend, lost and distraught. He seemed to want to ask something, but he knew he wouldn't get an answer from me. That day, I had only taken the gourd pendant from the room. This mansion had once belonged to Frank, but over the years, it had likely had many owners. Now, the only thing still tied to him was the pendant I had once given him. Even though it had long been clear that our fates had diverged, when he had appeared and disappeared before me, I still felt a pang of loss. The pendant in my hand seemed to remind me that the connection between me and that era of fire and war had been severed. The Adela of now was simply Adela. When I turned 28, I completed my PhD and officially joined a research institute. My social life was minimal. I spent my days entirely in the laboratory. At first, my family tried to contact me, the parents who can do no wrong in the world. But I wasn't the daughter they wanted, and they weren't the parents I wanted. My demands for material life were modest. My work satisfied my personal ambitions, though my supervisors often fussed over me, insisting that security officers accompany me in and out. Eventually, they must have realized that as long as I didn't want to see them, they couldn't appear before me. They had no idea where I lived now. The so-called arranged destiny of marriage could never fall to me. For many years after, I lived alone, learning bits of information about them from others. Patty gradually stepped back, and Marsh took over the company. But in this ever-changing era, competitors emerged rapidly. Even a business genius like Marsh could hardly resist the currents of time. The company declined, albeit slowly. As for Anna, she had a child, but I heard Gary wasn't a good man. Some men are like fermented wine. They look fine at first glance, but one whiff reveals they've gone bad. Anna and he had once had a passionate affair, but over the years, they wasted time on each other. This was just my perspective. Anna and I had different goals. Her life now wasn't much different from the life she had at 13, standing at the steps as I had described. Her material life still reached heights most could never touch. Later, one of my research achievements was published. Patty used that opportunity to publicly announce my identity. For a time, they contacted me insistently, hoping I would return for Patty's birthday celebration. Anna, it seemed, had become a discarded pawn in this drama. Patty, in weighing things, or perhaps realizing during previous corporate crises, decided that having a daughter in scientific research would be a useful bridge into politics. I received a belated message from Anna, full of resentment. "You won." What Patty didn't know was that some of my research could never be revealed. It meant I could never be controlled by him as a biological father. I blocked him immediately, finding him irksome. Later, when Marsh tried to say something, it wasn't what I wanted to hear. I blocked both father and son. I immersed myself in work until even my supervisors and colleagues worried about my personal life. I could only tell them that my heart belonged entirely to research, and I had decided to dedicate my life to it. Over the years, several outstanding men appeared in my life. They were good people, but in my world, moments of romantic excitement rarely arose. The roped elder had once told me that my present life was also my next life. This allowed me to merge Adela's memories, feeling what she felt, along with memories of my past life. It took a long time for me to develop a sense of belonging in this era. In my spare time, I occasionally bought flowers to keep at home. I wanted pets, but I was too busy and worried I couldn't care for them. Later, I began mentoring students. Watching their unscarred faces, I felt a certain nostalgia for my own past. I wasn't severe, but I was rigorous. My students endured a lot under my guidance, but they were all excellent young people. I stood at the lectern and began teaching theoretical knowledge. We were telling the story of this generation. Extra, Frank's perspective. I met Adela as a child. Her father once taught me calligraphy. Adela was strong-willed from a young age. She was beautiful, but not just in appearance. We grew up together, witnessing our country's suffering and our people's hardships. Though unwilling, we were powerless. Her father donated much of his wealth, yet it was insufficient. My parents later moved north for business, supplying food to the army. She said she wanted to study abroad, to see other countries' landscapes. Those were dangerous times. My parents decided to send both of us away. When we first felt love, we secretly kissed on summer nights, learning like others. She was like a light in my life. I couldn't help but draw close and fall in love with her. She was so wonderful. Later, after many hardships, we returned home. We promised to be together forever. But war broke out again. Though on the same side, we had to endure a temporary separation. I was exposed while helping civilians retreat. Death was close. Before losing consciousness, I prayed that my Adela could one day see a country without war. She was such a wonderful person. She would have other admirers. She would meet someone better. If I have any regret, it's that I had not seen her for so long. I truly wished I could see her once more.